For decades, scientists have tried to map every inch of Alaska, but there's one region their instruments can't explain. A triangle-shaped zone where magnetic north drifts off course, weather turns violent in seconds, and entire search teams lose contact mid-mission. Locals speak of spirits. The military stays quiet. But one thing's certain, when you enter the Alaskan Triangle, not everyone comes back. Over 20,000 people have vanished since the 1970s, more than twice the national average. And we aren't exaggerating. This is a documented statistic from Alaska's own records. This isn't some ghost story passed around campfires. This is one of the most verifiable disappearance zones on the planet. Locals call it the Alaskan Triangle. On a map, it stretches between Anchorage in the south, Juneau along the coast, and Utqiagvik up north near the Arctic Circle. Inside those borders lies nearly 200,000 square miles of pure, raw wilderness, thick forest, frozen tundra, mountains and valleys that barely anyone has ever set foot in. But for a state with fewer people than most American cities, Alaska accounts for an unbelievable percentage of the country's missing persons. And the numbers aren't just missing hikers or reckless adventurers. Commercial pilots, trained soldiers, and even rescue workers have vanished while searching for others. Every time someone goes missing, it feels like the land just absorbs them, as if Alaska itself doesn't want to give them back. Search and rescue crews say they're dealing with a land that doesn't play fair. The weather can flip in seconds, blue skies to blizzard without warning. GPS signals fail in certain valleys. Magnetic compasses spin off course. Helicopters lose radio contact. Sometimes entire teams have to abort missions because their instruments go haywire. Maybe that's why so many people vanish. Maybe it's nature reclaiming what's hers. Or maybe something else is happening. Because the pattern isn't random. Many of these disappearances occur within that same invisible boundary, the Alaskan Triangle. Pilots have logged reports of strange lights in the sky. Some say their instruments went berserk moments before going dark. And in more than one case, rescue teams have discovered freshly crashed planes with no pilot, no passengers, and no sign of impact struggle. You can call it coincidence. You can call it human error. But when coincidences pile up over 50 years, they stop looking random. They start looking like a pattern, one with no easy explanation. But this mystery didn't start in the 70s. Alaska's indigenous peoples, the Tlingit, the Inuit, and the Athabaskan have told stories for centuries about spirits that guard certain mountains and rivers, spirits that lure travelers away from safety. The ancient tales speak of men who vanish into the fog, or voices in the wind calling a man by name. Of course, modern science doesn't record that, but the old myths line up eerily close to where modern disappearances keep happening. The US military has studied parts of the region for years, particularly the area around Mount Hayes, a place some believe holds secrets far older than the state itself. But we'll get to that later. For now, what matters is almost a supernatural fear that something about this land defies the rules we live by. And to understand why, we first need to understand the land. What is it about Alaska, its mountains, its air, its invisible fields of force that makes people vanish without a trace? Because until we understand the environment, we can't even begin to understand the mystery. The land that doesn't want you there. This is not a place built for people. It's raw, untamed, and dangerous in ways that numbers can't capture. Temperatures here regularly drop below -50 degrees Fahrenheit. At that point, your breath freezes in your throat. Your eyelashes turn to ice. Every year, snowstorms sweep through with no warning. What looks like a clear horizon can turn into a wall of white within seconds. Even helicopters flying just a few hundred feet above ground have slammed into mountainsides they never saw coming. Pilots who've flown here for decades talk about how quickly things go wrong. But the weather is only one part of the problem. The land beneath it is just as unpredictable. Massive volcanic ranges slice through the center of the triangle, and deep beneath the snow are canyons and crevasses that can swallow trucks, snowmobiles, even small planes. There are entire valleys where the ground shifts like a living thing, layers of permafrost melting and refreezing, turning solid soil into hidden traps. Then there are the rivers, thousands of them, winding through every direction, many of them deceptively wide and calm. Beneath that calm surface, strong undercurrents pull anything that falls in straight under the ice. It's said some rivers in Alaska don't give back what they take. Still, none of that fully explains the one mystery that keeps experts up at night: the magnetic anomalies. In several parts of the Alaskan Triangle, compasses don't just drift a few degrees, they spin, sometimes 30 degrees off from true north. That might not sound like much, but for a pilot, that's a death sentence. 30 degrees off course in this kind of wilderness can send a plane into a mountain or hundreds of miles away from its intended route. Scientists call this magnetic declination. It's not fully understood why it's so intense here. Some blame the iron-rich rock formations beneath the mountains. Others think it's tied to shifts in Earth's magnetic field that pass through this region. Whatever the cause, it makes navigation unreliable. GPS signals flicker, radios drop, and pilots report entire systems freezing before going completely dark. Even the US Geological Survey has flagged parts of Alaska as interference zones, where electronic instruments behave erratically for reasons they can't fully explain. The deeper you go into those regions, the more unpredictable it gets. Indigenous Alaskan elders have a saying, "The land remembers." They believe every step taken into these wild places carries a kind of energy, and if that energy disrespects the land takes it back. Elders speak of certain valleys where people vanish because they weren't meant to be there. They say the land has memory, it knows who belongs and who doesn't. Modern ears might dismiss that as myth, but when you see how many skilled mountaineers, soldiers and pilots have vanished here without a trace, those words start to sound less poetic and more like a warning. One of the most baffling patterns is how calm these disappearances seem to be. It's rarely chaos. It's quiet. Pilots don't radio for help. Hikers don't send flares. Their last transmissions are often routine, then gone. Whatever happens here, it happens fast. And that's where this mystery deepens. Because for all the natural explanations, the cold, the mountains, the storms, some believe the disappearances go beyond that. They say something else lives here. Something that doesn't show up on radar or maps. Something that's been watching long before the first person ever walked across the ice. Deep in the forests of southeastern Alaska, people tell an old story. A story older than the state itself, passed down through generations of the Tlingit people, whispered around fires as the snow piled high outside. It's the story of Kushtaka, the land otter man, a creature said to live within the wilderness of the Alaskan Triangle. According to the Tlingit, the Kushtaka is neither man nor beast, but something caught in between. It can walk upright like a human, yet its skin is covered in thick fur, its fingers webbed like an otter's. Some say it has sharp, glinting teeth. Others say its face changes, flickering between human and animal, depending on whether it's hunting or hiding. But the part that makes it truly terrifying is what it can do. The Kushtaka can mimic the sound of a human voice. Travelers say the voice sounds like someone lost, a child sobbing, a woman screaming, or a man calling for help. It plays on one of the most powerful instincts humans have: empathy. You hear that sound out in the cold, echoing through the trees, and your body reacts before your mind does. You move towards it. You think someone's in trouble. You think you're helping. That's when it strikes. The Kushtaka waits near riverbanks and cliffs, in places where the snow muffles footsteps and the mist hides shapes. The stories say it doesn't attack with rage or chaos. It's calm, deliberate. It lets you come close enough to see something, a figure, half bent, shivering in the cold before it turns. That's when you realise it isn't a person at all. That's when you run. But by then the forest has already closed behind you. In some versions of the story, the Kushtaka kills quickly. It drags victims underwater, tearing them apart like prey. In others, its goal is transformation. It takes those it finds and turns them into one of its own kind. Not to save them, but to keep them. Many believe the legend came from a symbolic truth. In Alaska, death by exposure is common. People freeze within steps of shelter because disorientation and hypothermia cause hallucinations. Victims often remove their clothing in a final, confused act known as paradoxical undressing. The Tlingit saw bodies found half naked in the snow and created meaning from tragedy. They said the Kushtaka took them, changed them, made them something else. But others insist the legend came from encounters, sightings too strange to explain away. There's an old account from Sitka, a coastal town that's seen more than its share of loss. During a famine long ago, a small group went missing after heading upriver to find food. When rescuers finally reached their camp, they found everything untouched: the tools, the fires, the tents. But the people were gone. Only strange footprints, part human, part webbed, circled the site. For years after, locals swore they heard voices in that valley. Familiar voices, people they knew, calling for help. One of the most infamous was in the mid-17th century, in a place called Thomas Bay. Locals still call it the Bay of Death or Devil's Country. The story begins with a massive landslide that buried an entire Tlingit village, killing hundreds. Afterwards, survivors refused to return. They said the land had been cursed by what lived beneath it. Decades later, in 1900, a prospector named Harry Culp visited the area and claimed he saw something that haunted him forever. He wrote about humanoid creatures covered in coarse fur, walking upright, making high-pitched cries that sounded like human laughter. When he fled the valley, he left behind his gear, his food, everything but his life. Culp said the creatures didn't chase him to kill him, they herded him out, like guards of a place he wasn't supposed to see. His story spread quickly, and for over a century, locals have avoided Thomas Bay after dark. Even today, some refuse to fish there. They say that when the wind shifts, you can still hear laughter echoing off the cliffs. And if folklore can explain a few of these vanishings, what about the ones that defy every law of physics? What about the planes that vanish into clear skies, never to be seen again? It was January 26, 1950. A Douglas C-54. Skymaster lifted off from Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, bound for Great Falls, Montana. On board were 44 people. Crew members, servicemen, civilians all expecting a routine flight across the snowy spine of Alaska. The weather wasn't ideal, but nothing unusual for the Arctic skies. The Skymaster was one of the Air Force's most reliable transports at the time, the same model used during World War II to move men and cargo across the globe. But somewhere between Anchorage and its next radio check-in, the plane disappeared. Within hours, the US and Canadian militaries launched one of the largest aerial searches in North American history. They called it Operation Mike. Over 85 aircraft scoured the Alaskan wilderness. Nearly 7,000 men combed through snow-covered valleys, frozen rivers, and ridgelines that looked identical mile after mile. The search covered 165,000 square miles, roughly the size of California. As the days turned into weeks, hope turned into confusion. How could a 4-engine aircraft, one of the most advanced of its time, vanish without a single clue? The mountains had no answers. The rivers kept their secrets. The mission logs eventually grew quiet. Operation Mike was officially suspended, leaving 44 families with nothing but silence. And the Skymaster wasn't the only one. The 1950s and 60s were a deadly era for aviation in Alaska. Harsh weather played a role, yes, but the sheer number of disappearances raised eyebrows even among experienced pilots. In several documented cases, aircraft vanished mid-communication. A pilot could be speaking to a control tower 1 second, and the line would just die. Even modern search teams equipped with satellite imaging and thermal sensors have found nothing in those cases. Then came 1972, the year that turned the Alaskan Triangle from a mystery into a political scandal. A twin-engine Cessna 310 took off from Anchorage, bound for Juneau. Aboard were US Congressman Hale Boggs, a member of the Warren Commission that investigated President John F. Kennedy's assassination, and Congressman Nick Begich, along with their aide and pilot. They were on a routine political trip. The flight plan was clear, weather stable enough to fly, but somewhere over the Chugach Mountains, the plane vanished. Within hours, a massive search was launched. For 39 days, 400 aircraft and dozens of ships scoured the area. Even spy satellites, the kind used to monitor Soviet missile sites, were retasked to look for heat signatures. The effort involved the Coast Guard, the Air Force, and civilian volunteers. But like the Skymaster, Boggs' plane was never found. It was as if the same invisible curtain that took the C-54 had opened again and closed behind it. In the months before his disappearance, Congressman Boggs had been openly critical of the FBI and Director J. Edgar Hoover. He'd even called out the Warren Commission's own inconsistencies regarding the JFK assassination. Boggs reportedly told colleagues he planned to reopen certain aspects of that case. Then suddenly, his plane goes missing inside one of the most inaccessible and mysterious regions on Earth. To this day, no official connection has ever been proven between Boggs' disappearance and his political stance, but the timing combined with the sheer scale of the search fueled decades of speculation. Some believe the wreckage was found and quietly recovered under government orders. Others say it never existed in the first place, that the plane went down in a region so unstable, so wild, that the land simply erased it overnight. And these aren't isolated cases. Over the decades, hundreds of smaller aircraft have gone missing within the same triangle. Some were private bush planes ferrying supplies. Others were tour charters with full passenger manifests. A few were even sighted before vanishing, radar blips disappearing mid-transmission, or locals reporting low-flying aircraft that never arrived anywhere. But even these vanishings might not be the full story, because as some researchers would later argue, the pattern of disappearances doesn't just stop at aircraft or hikers. It overlaps with government projects, magnetic fields, and rumours of secret bases buried deep beneath the ice. During the height of the Cold War, Alaska was America's front line. The state sat like a frozen balcony overlooking the Soviet Union. From the 1950s onward, US intelligence agencies saw Alaska as a natural shield, a place where radar towers and early warning systems could detect Russian bombers long before they reached American soil. This meant one thing: the US military needed to build, test, and operate deep in the most unforgiving land on the continent. Airfields started appearing where there were once only glaciers. Hidden bunkers, radar domes, and experimental testing ranges popped up across the interior. Some were openly listed as defense infrastructure. Others had no public record at all. The triangle that stretches between Anchorage, Juneau, and Utqiagvik quickly became a hub for operations that didn't officially exist. And that's when the crashes began. One of the first to draw attention was a B-36 bomber that went down in 1950, just months before the Skymaster incident. It was part of a secret mission called Operation Green Hornet. The plane was carrying a Mark IV nuclear bomb, the same type used during the early atomic era. According to official reports, the bomb wasn't armed. It supposedly contained a dummy core, but the aircraft's disappearance triggered one of the most intense searches in US Air Force history. The B-36 was last heard from over the Pacific coast, somewhere near the Alaskan air corridor. Hours later, it simply vanished from radar. The military initially told the public it had crashed in British Columbia after mechanical failure. But decades later, declassified documents revealed something different. Parts of the wreckage were scattered far beyond the reported crash site. The bomb casing itself was never recovered. The idea that a nuclear weapon, or at least its components, disappeared in or near the Alaskan Triangle has kept investigators uneasy for decades. A weapon like that, even unarmed, could leave a lasting radioactive footprint. Yet no official cleanup or recovery was ever documented. The story was quietly buried under the label training accident. And that's a phrase you'll see a lot if you start digging into Alaskan military records from the 1950s through the 1980s. Training accident, test mission failure, navigation error. The same phrases appear again and again covering aircraft disappearances, radar malfunctions, and missing personnel. And a surprising number of these accidents happened within the boundaries of the triangle. During those years, the Cold War paranoia ran deep. The US was experimenting with new radar systems, communication networks, and electromagnetic field generators designed to detect enemy bombers. Some of these tests involve manipulating radio frequencies at high power levels, the kind of energy that can distort compasses and interfere with navigation. By the late 1960s, both the CIA and the Air Force had established research stations across Alaska. Some were legitimate tracking bases for satellites and missile defense. Others were simply marked as Arctic communications research. The public never knew what went on there. Files from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, mention geophysical resonance experiments conducted in northern Alaska during that period, a vague phrase that could mean anything from seismic testing to directed energy research. Then there's the matter of the electromagnetic footprint. For decades, Scientists have noted that certain regions of Alaska show unusual ionospheric activity, energy fluctuations, that seem to originate from below ground rather than above. Some geologists believe it's due to mineral density or volcanic movement, but others, including a few within the intelligence community, suspected it was the residue of buried technology, maybe even Cold War-era transmitters that never got decommissioned. And then, decades later, a new structure appeared in the Alaskan wilderness that reignited every one of those old theories, the HAARP facility in Gakona. Officially, HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, was built in the 1990s to study the ionosphere, the upper layer of Earth's atmosphere that affects radio and GPS communication. The project was jointly funded by the Air Force, the Navy, and the University of Alaska. On paper, it was just a scientific research station. In reality, it looked like a farm of steel towers wired to transmit immense bursts of electromagnetic energy into the sky. From the start, HAARP was controversial. Locals complained of strange hums and electrical interference. Hunters reported compasses malfunctioning near the site. And conspiracy researchers, connecting dots that stretched back to the 1950s, accused the program of being far more than atmospheric science. They claimed it could manipulate weather, trigger earthquakes, or even influence human behavior by altering electromagnetic fields in the atmosphere. The government denied all of it. They insisted HAARP was harmless, a small research project with limited output. But even scientists who worked nearby admitted that the array was capable of producing signals powerful enough to heat sections of the ionosphere, a region directly tied to radio and magnetic navigation. So could HAARP have been a continuation of those earlier Cold War experiments, the same kind that might have caused electromagnetic chaos decades before in the Alaskan Triangle? What makes this theory compelling is how often disappearances align with areas of known interference. The same corridor where pilots report compass failure runs directly through zones that were used for radar calibration, early warning missile detection, and later HAARP transmissions. In a state as large and unpopulated as Alaska, overlapping military zones might seem random, but the repetition is too clean to ignore. Over the years, there have also been whispers about underground facilities hidden within Alaska's mountains. Former intelligence contractors, speaking anonymously, have described deep storage installations used during the Cold War to house experimental equipment, possibly even energy-based weapons systems. These facilities, they claim, were buried to shield them from detection by Soviet satellites. Whether those claims are true or not, one thing's certain: the Alaskan terrain is perfect for hiding anything. Miles of permafrost, ice caves, and natural tunnels make it nearly impossible for satellite imaging to reveal what's below. And that brings us back to the disappearances. If electromagnetic testing or buried technology can disrupt radio and compass systems, could it also cause aircraft to lose control, veer off course, or simply vanish from radar? If so, then those accidents weren't accidents at all. They were unintended casualties of secret research. And once the wrecks went down, recovery efforts would have been classified immediately to protect the technology involved. And that's where this story takes a sharp turn. Because if the Alaskan Triangle is a byproduct of government testing, it means the disappearances aren't random at all. They're the fallout of experiments that were never supposed to reach the public. So what if the real danger in Alaska isn't the wilderness but the secrets buried beneath it? Decades ago, researchers started mapping ancient monuments and discovered that many of them, Stonehenge, the Great Pyramids, Machu Picchu, all line up along what they called energy grids of the Earth. These invisible lines supposedly carry natural electromagnetic power, converging at hotspots known as nodes. According to some, one of those nodes sits right inside the Alaskan Triangle. If that's true, then it wouldn't just explain the magnetic anomalies, it might explain the feeling of unease that people describe, the distorted sense of time, and why so many modern devices simply give up inside that zone. Take the town of Gakona, for example. It's not far from where multiple ley lines are said to cross. Coincidentally, that's where the US government later built the HAARP facility, a project officially created to study the ionosphere. But long before HAARP, locals were already reporting odd lights in the sky. humming sounds that seemed to vibrate through the ground, and fog walls that formed out of nowhere. These might sound like exaggerations, but when hundreds of unrelated witnesses tell eerily similar stories, it's hard to dismiss. Pilots flying over the area have logged cases of altimeters suddenly dropping hundreds of feet, only to reset seconds later. Entire flight paths have been rerouted because of unexplained turbulence in clear skies. Even more bizarre are the stories from hikers whose compasses start spinning in circles, forcing them to rely on instinct rather than equipment. Some describe losing sense of direction entirely, walking for hours before realizing they've been circling the same spot. A few who made it out say it felt as if time itself slowed down. They'd walk for what felt like minutes, only to find that hours had passed. Science doesn't have an easy explanation for that. One hypothesis is that large mineral deposits beneath the ice, like magnetite or iron, create localized electromagnetic fields that scramble devices. That's plausible, but then why would these anomalies appear and vanish so suddenly? Some physicists who've studied the reports admit there's more happening here than simple magnetism. That's where the term vortex starts showing up. Not the kind you see in water, but an electromagnetic whirlpool, where fields twist and bend space itself. In theory, strong electromagnetic activity could distort time perception and even interfere with brainwaves. In fringe science circles, this is called a portal effect. Sedona, Arizona, is famous for similar energy vortexes that visitors claim make them feel euphoric or disoriented. Stonehenge has the same reputation. So if these vortexes exist elsewhere, maybe the Alaskan Triangle is their northern counterpart. Now, mainstream scientists hesitate to go that far. They stick to what can be measured. But here's the problem. The readings from the triangle often don't make sense. Magnetometers spike for no reason, compasses flip north and south unpredictably, and seismic sensors pick up tremors that never reach the surface. When researchers attempt to replicate these findings elsewhere, they can't. Whatever's happening seems locked to this specific region. Another theory links it to subglacial currents of energy trapped within the ice for centuries, slowly releasing through cracks as temperatures shift. That might sound poetic, but it lines up with some geological evidence. Alaska's crust is alive with fault lines, and beneath the surface, massive stores of metals and crystals could interact with magnetic fields in ways we barely understand. Some scientists believe these forces might even affect the human brain, creating brief hallucinations, confusion, or a sense of presence, which could explain why some people who disappear in the triangle are said to have wandered off in a trance. Every explanation circles back to the same idea. Something in the Alaskan Triangle bends the rules. Whether that's magnetic distortion, energy vortexes, or something more cosmic, no one's been able to fully map it. And for every scientific experiment that tries to bring clarity, a new mystery appears. Another plane that disappears. Another hiker who walks into fog and never walks out. There has even been claims of UFO sightings in Alaska. There's a reason Alaska shows up on UFO maps more often than anywhere else in North America. The skies here are enormous, empty and strangely alive. Pilots talk about lights that move against the wind. Radar operators pick up objects they can't identify, then lose them just as suddenly. And soldiers stationed near remote installations whisper about visitors that come and go without warning. This isn't some modern internet rumour either. Alaska has been a UFO hotspot for decades. Among all those sightings, one stands out. The night of November 17th, 1986. Japan Airlines Flight 1628, a Boeing 747 cargo plane, was flying from Paris to Tokyo with a refueling stop in Anchorage. Captain Kenju Terauchi had flown that route hundreds of times. He was an experienced pilot, calm under pressure, not the type to panic at shadows. But what he saw that evening over Alaska's frozen wilderness would make him question everything he thought he knew about the sky. Just after 5 p.m, as the aircraft cruised over the interior of Alaska at 35,000 feet, Terauchi noticed something unusual. 2 small lights pacing his plane. They weren't blinking like normal aircraft lights. They glowed solid, bright amber. At first he thought it might be military jets, but they were moving too erratically. The lights suddenly shot in front of his cockpit, so close that the cabin filled with a warm orange glow. Terauchi and his crew could feel the heat on their faces. He radioed Anchorage air traffic control. "Do you have traffic in front of us?" The response came back after a moment. "Negative. We show no traffic." But the lights were right there, two glowing orbs that suddenly merged into one massive craft. Tarouchi later described it as a huge spaceship with two rectangular arrays like glowing exhaust pipes. The object was enormous, easily several times larger than his own 747. It moved silently, gliding through the air as if gravity didn't apply to it. Anchorage controllers scrambled to verify. They contacted the FAA's radar center, and soon both civil and military radars confirmed it. There was an unidentified object near Flight 1628. For over 30 minutes, the mysterious craft tracked alongside the Japanese plane, sometimes darting ahead, sometimes hanging behind. The crew could see it clearly against the stars. Tarouchi's first officer and flight engineer both confirmed it on sight. They weren't imagining things. Then, without warning, the object disappeared from visual sight, but radar still had it. The FAA called nearby Air Force installations, asking if they had anything in the airspace. The military denied it. Controllers told the 747 to make several turns to see if the object followed. It did. Every time the plane changed direction, the unknown craft mirrored the move. Finally, Anchorage instructed Flight 1628 to descend and head toward Fairbanks. As they approached the city lights, the UFO faded into the darkness and was gone. By the time they landed, everyone on board was shaken but alive. When word of the incident spread, the FAA launched a full investigation. Radar tapes confirmed that for about half an hour, something solid and unidentified had been in controlled airspace. The story hit the media fast. Even the FAA's own division chief, John Callahan, later admitted that government agencies had quietly taken all the records and classified them. He revealed years later that he had seen the radar data himself, and there was no mistake. It showed an enormous unknown target shadowing Flight 1628. But after the initial review, higher-ups ordered the files sealed. That incident wasn't isolated. Military personnel in Alaska have been reporting similar encounters since the Cold War. Pilots flying near the Aleutian Islands described silver discs darting between clouds faster than any known aircraft. Radar operators at Elmendorf Air Force Base have spoken anonymously about fast walkers, blips that appear and disappear instantly, travelling thousands of miles an hour. These weren't weather balloons or flocks of birds. Even the most skeptical analysts couldn't explain them. In the 1950s and 60s, when nuclear bombers and spy planes crisscrossed Alaskan airspace, reports of strange objects multiplied. Some Air Force pilots were ordered to intercept unidentified targets, only to vanish themselves. Officially, those losses were training accidents, but families of the missing pilots never bought that explanation. Several missions were logged as classified, and no wreckage was ever recovered. Even decades after Flight 1628, the reports keep coming. In 2016, multiple pilots near Anchorage reported glowing spheres hovering at 40,000 feet. Civilian air traffic control logged them, and once again, radar confirmed an unknown target. Within hours, the data was scrubbed from FAA servers. No public report was ever released. Every investigator who's looked at Alaska's UFO files ends up with more questions than answers. Why are the radar logs always missing? Why do pilots who report sightings get disciplined or reassigned? And why does the military always seem to know more than it admits? Maybe the reason lies in the land itself. Elders from the Tlingit, the Athabaskan, and the Yupik still talk about places you don't go. They'll tell you in calm voices that some valleys aren't empty. They're owned. Not by people, but by something older. Hunters who ignored those warnings never came back, and the ones who did return are different. They'd sit by the fire, eyes distant, mumbling about voices in the wind or shapes that walked behind them without leaving prints. Anthropologists sometimes dismiss those stories as oral traditions built around survival. But that's the thing, they were about survival. These were people who'd lived on this land for thousands of years. They learned to read its moods, its silences. Take the area near Lake Iliamna, known locally as one of the bad medicine regions. Fishermen and pilots have vanished there for decades. The lake itself is massive, roughly 80 miles long, and eerily still. Locals say that on calm nights you can hear a deep, droning hum rising from its depths. Scientists chalk it up to trapped gases or shifting ice. The elders call it the lake breathing, but they also say it's warning people to leave. Over the years, small planes have gone down there without leaving a ripple. Search teams send sonar, divers, drones, nothing. The water swallows evidence as if it never existed. Further north, near the Wrangell Mountains, there's another place the native maps marked long before outsiders arrived. They called it the land that whistles. Hunters swore the trees there would make high-pitched sounds even when there was no wind. In the 1940s, a group of miners built a temporary camp near that forest. Within weeks, 2 men vanished during a snowstorm. Their tracks ended in the middle of an open clearing. The remaining miners left immediately, abandoning all their equipment. Locals who found the site later said they could still hear faint whistling echoing across the ice. That same region is now part of the modern Triangle disappearance zone. What's fascinating is how these old taboos line up with something modern science can measure. Geologists have mapped Alaska's magnetic anomalies, places where the Earth's field bends and twists more than usual. Many of those distortions cluster right beneath the same cursed grounds from Indigenous stories. Compass needles spin, electronics glitch, and even satellite readings blur. Whether you call it bad medicine or magnetic interference, the result is the same. People lose their way, and some never find it again. Then there's the strange pattern of energy beneath the surface. Alaska sits on a tangled web of tectonic faults. Under the snow and permafrost, entire slabs of earth grind, stretch, and shift. That movement releases natural electromagnetic currents, low frequencies that, according to some researchers, can affect human perception. Western researchers who study these patterns often stop short of calling it supernatural, but even they admit the coincidences are eerie. In 2018, a team from the University of Alaska compared GPS data with historical disappearance records. They found that 70% of vanishings happened within 20 miles of documented magnetic disturbances. That overlap mirrors the locations of traditional taboo zones almost perfectly. Take the case of Rick Hills, a 35-year-old bush pilot from Fairbanks. He'd been flying these routes for nearly a decade, knew the terrain better than most. In May 2008, Rick took off from Talkeetna to deliver supplies to a remote mining camp. The weather was perfect, skies clear, visibility for miles. He radioed air traffic control at 10:42 a.m. saying, "Crossing the ridge, smooth flying." That was the last anyone heard from him. When Rick didn't check in, a search began. Helicopters, planes, even satellite sweeps. For 10 days, nothing. No debris, no signal. Then winter came, and with it, silence. 2 years later, hikers found a fragment of his wing lodged in the ice of a glacier, nearly 60 miles off his original flight path. The black box had been crushed flat, as if by immense pressure. The rest of the plane and Rick never surfaced. Stories like Rick's aren't rare in Alaska. Since the 1970s, over 20,000 people have disappeared within the Triangle's borders. That's more than twice the national average for missing persons per capita. Every year, about 3 to 4 out of every 1,000 Alaskans vanish. Some are found days later, disoriented but alive. Most aren't found at all. In 2014, 2 friends from Anchorage, Jennifer and Chris, both in their early 30s, set out for a weekend hike in the Chugach Mountains. They texted a photo from the summit that afternoon, smiling against a backdrop of endless white. That was the last anyone heard. Search and rescue teams combed the area for a week. GPS trackers from their phones stopped transmitting within minutes of each other. When teams reached those coordinates, they found only a single boot print in the snow. One step, then nothing. It's easy to say Alaska's just dangerous. Harsh terrain, sudden weather changes, endless wilderness. But some patterns don't fit that explanation. According to official search data, a majority of disappearances happen during clear weather, not storms. And they tend to cluster in regions where magnetic anomalies are strongest. In several of those zones, radio and GPS instruments fail completely. Even the most advanced rescue teams have reported strange readings, coordinates shifting hundreds of feet in seconds, compasses spinning in circles, radar blips that appear and vanish. One veteran rescuer, Tom Kearns, has worked Alaskan searches since the 80s. He's seen more than 100 missions end in silence. In a 2019 interview, he said, "You'll be standing in the middle of nowhere, clear skies, you can see 20 miles, and suddenly your radio just cuts. Then you get this feeling like someone's standing behind you. Everyone I've worked with knows that feeling. You turn around, no one's there, but you know something's off." Then there are the discoveries that only deepen the mystery. In 2021, a hunter in the Yukon River Basin stumbled upon an aircraft wheel protruding from the ice. Investigators confirmed it belonged to a small Cessna that had disappeared in 1997. The strange part? The wreckage was over 30 miles from its last radar contact and perfectly preserved, as if frozen the moment it vanished. The pilot's seatbelt was still latched. No signs of an impact trail, no human remains, and no distress call ever logged. The official report listed it as cause undetermined. The same year, a group of hikers near the Wrangell St. Elias Range found what looked like fragments of a downed chopper. But when the coordinates were checked against FAA records, there were no reports of a helicopter crash in that area. Some of the metal pieces looked decades old, others newer, with serial numbers that didn't match any known models. When investigators returned months later, the site was gone, buried under a fresh collapse of snow and rock. One of the eeriest modern cases is that of Eric Nelson, a survivalist from Talkeetna, who prided himself on knowing the wilderness better than anyone. In 2016, he set out to film a documentary about the Alaskan Triangle itself, a project exploring local myths and science behind the disappearances. He left detailed plans with friends, carried multiple GPS trackers, and even live-streamed part of his trip. 3 days in, the signal from his satellite phone cut mid-sentence. The last words were, "That's strange, I'm picking up another signal nearby." Search teams found his camp abandoned, gear scattered, food untouched. One of his trackers was later recovered miles away, embedded in the ice. It showed coordinates that didn't exist, a point between two registered map grids, labelled simply as error. Eric's footage was never found. When search and rescue teams are deployed, they use helicopters equipped with infrared scanners to pick up body heat. But in several cases, they've reported phantom readings, heat signatures that flicker and vanish seconds later. And it's not just the wilderness. Even near towns, people vanish. In 2019, a small tour group travelling between Girdwood and Portage stopped for photos along the highway. When they got back in the van, one passenger was gone. Authorities combed the area for 2 weeks. No trace was ever found. The disappearance happened within a known magnetic distortion zone. Patterns like these have caught the attention of independent researchers. Some are trying to create a full digital map of disappearances, overlaying them with geological and electromagnetic data. Early results show what locals have been saying all along. Certain areas pull more vanishings than others. Scientists suggest unstable terrain, sudden fog banks, or natural disorientation. But when you compare decades of reports, even skeptics admit something deeper seems to be connecting them. Because that's the part nobody agrees on. Not just what happens here, but why it keeps happening. Why, decade after decade, people keep disappearing without a trace. Why, even with satellites, drones, and military tracking, the same regions stay silent. It's as if the triangle adapts, staying one step ahead, hiding in plain sight, erasing its own evidence. Whatever the truth is, it's still out there, buried in the ice, waiting for the next traveller who dares to look for it.